Good evening. You're on the smoking section with Stephen Helfer every Wednesday at 7 p.m. To keep apprised of the issues relating to tobacco here in the city of Cambridge and in the state of Massachusetts, the United States, and the world. All of the tobacco issues and where Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights stands on them. And today we took a little, we had a expedition out to the city of Leominster, which is about 1 hour northwest on Route 2, because the city was considering a ban on flavored tobaccos, and the Public Health Department was going to meet, the Public Health Commission was going to meet this morning and determine whether they would ban flavored tobaccos. Now, of course, the anti-smoking groups maintain that flavored tobaccos are designed by the evil tobacco companies to seduce young people into smoking, and that is probably, for the most part, false, because most of the people who use flavored tobacco products are flavored e-liquids, are adults, and they are smokers. And as I've pointed out before, the teenage smoking rate in the country right now is the lowest it's been in 50 years. So if the tobacco companies are trying to seduce young people into smoking, they don't seem to be very successful at it. So really what these companies are doing, or what the anti-smoking groups are doing, is really just harassing smokers and the businesses that depend on smokers. And on their way, their step-by-step movement towards total tobacco prohibition, which they are doing incrementally, step by step. So today it's flavored tobacco. Tomorrow it's perhaps a cap on stores that can sell tobacco. Then perhaps they will try to ban menthol, and so forth and so on. And there was some pushback in the city of Leominster, which was detailed in a report that we ran, or an article that we ran on our Facebook page. So a fellow Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights member, David Jamie and I left this morning the city of Cambridge at about 6 o'clock. And fortunately, David is very punctual, so we were able to get on the road at 6 and be in the city by a little after 7 and be able to attend the hearing at 7:30. There wasn't a lot of discussion. This was not a hearing that was open for the public, because there already had been a public hearing. This was something that simply the Public Health Commission was going to vote on. Unfortunately, they did vote on it, and unfortunately, they decided to ban flavored tobaccos, which I am not terribly familiar with. I think this mostly relates to cigars, and I certainly don't know of any flavored cigarettes. The only kind of flavored cigarette that is currently being sold, or it's currently popular, is menthol. And but there was a convenience store owner there. I think he is either Pakistani or Indian, and he has been cited for several violations, perhaps selling to people under the age of 18. I think it's 18 there. I don't know. It might be 21, and other violations. So it looked like he was going to have a hearing there. That was going to be part of the hearing, to see whether or not they would remove the suspension of his license to sell tobacco products in Leominster. And he had called me on the phone because I had dropped by his store the last time I was in Leominster, and he had asked me to come out, and there really wasn't a lot I could do, but he and his lawyer spoke before the Public Health Commission, and I think by having people in the audience, and there were only 2 or 3 people, 4 people in the audience at that time, it indicated to the Public Health Commission that there were people taking an interest in this, and as a result, they decided to give him another chance, so to speak. So if he keeps his nose clean for another few months, he will get his license back to sell tobacco products. But of course, complying with these tobacco laws is very complicated. You can't sell this, you can't sell that, you can't sell to this person, all of these kinds of things. And of course, the bureaucrats that run these anti-smoking organizations do everything they can to make it as complicated and difficult to comply with these rules as possible. I know that when I started smoking at the age of 11, I believe in New York State, the minimum age required to buy cigarette products was 16 or 18, but nobody really cared about it. So I could buy a carton of cigarettes at the age of 11. I remember buying a carton for a woman who was a nurse for my grandmother at the time, and she liked to smoke Marlboros. I'm pretty sure it was Marlboro Reds. And I had no trouble buying them at the age of 10 or 11, and I could buy cigarettes, at the age of 11 from machines and everything, and, pretty much I could smoke wherever I wanted to, and people wouldn't bother me. And I guess, the mankind's use of tobacco is a good gauge of freedom, because certainly in the New World, as we've mentioned, tobacco's been around 8,000 years, and it's got such a close connection with mankind that really only societies which are very, very far removed from nature abstain from tobacco. Any other society pretty much in the world which has ever come in contact with tobacco adopts it and reveres it in many cases. I mean, I'm talking about from the polar Eskimo to the Hottentot in the Kalahari Desert. They all love tobacco and use it. And so that there seems to be almost a kind of mystical relationship between mankind and tobacco. And again, only those societies that are far removed from nature, who spend their lives in front of computers and iPhones and all that sort of stuff, don't smoke. And so, I just think as a youth, when I could smoke and when I could purchase cigarettes, we lived in a much, much freer time, particularly around small things. I don't think you could murder people. I don't think you could sell heroin. I don't think you could speed through town and put other people in danger with your vehicle. But human beings, at least particularly in this country, were free to drink and free to smoke. And when you look at what's happening in Leominster and all over the state, and for example, in the United States, it's interesting to me that when people are overdosing from opioids, on a daily basis in this country or in this state, so many, and so much of the public is really ingesting so many psychoactive medications, which nobody knows the real long-term effects of. You have this anti-smoking movement, which is doing everything it can to annoy us smokers and to curtail our freedoms, and again, to curtail the freedoms of those businesses that depend on us. And for example, this store owner, this very this Pakistani, I guess. He has a very small convenience store in Leominster, and his tobacco sales really are the backbone, I think, are certainly a very important component of his business, which he uses to support his wife and his family. And here we have this state anti-smoking bureaucrat doing everything she can to put him out of business or make his life difficult. And you would think that the state of Massachusetts, with the number of homeless people, and again, the opioid crisis, and the fact that so many people feel the need for antidepressant drugs, would concentrate on these things rather than bothering people who, again, no matter what you say about tobacco, it does not interfere with your ability to perform work, study, drive a car, and it doesn't impair your judgment or put people in a situation where they might, like alcohol does, they might hurt themselves or hurt other people. So we're talking, and you cannot, it's absolutely impossible to overdose on tobacco. No matter how many cigarettes you smoke, or how many cigars you smoke, or how much snus you ingest, to my knowledge, there has never been a case in history, certainly not in the history of Massachusetts, where anyone has taken so much tobacco they drop dead. And even with, a few years ago, the people who were anti-electronic cigarettes were forecasting and predicting that all kinds of people would be ingesting e-nicotine or nicotine liquid and overdosing. And I think, the number of cases where that has happened in the entire United States in the last year, you can probably count on one hand, and even those are probably somewhat in dispute. Well, I think we're going to go to the Smoker of the Week, if I can pull her up today. And let's just see if we can get this. I hope you can bear with me. Okay, let's see. The Smoker of the Week this week is, here we go. Sorry to, Oh, there we go. Boy, it's just not as easy as one might think to operate all of this very highly sophisticated audio and video equipment we have here in our relatively new CCTV studio, although I guess these days it's not new anymore. Well, this woman's name is Dorothy Peel, and she died a couple of years ago at the age of 111. And she had been living in an old age home in a place called Bridlington, England. And according to several articles that were printed in local British papers, she had been told at the age of 85 that for her health she needed to quit smoking. Well, she didn't get around to quitting smoking until about 18 years later, at the age of 103, when she had a bout of bronchitis, and she decided to quit smoking again at the age of 103, and she remained very sharp until her eventual death at the age of 111. And even though she said she quit smoking at the age of 103, her family suspected, at least, that she did smoke an occasional cigarette. And Mrs. Peel was remembered well both World Wars, and during the Second World War, she barely survived a bombing. I think she was living in London at the time, and her neighbors were killed, unfortunately. When asked how she was able to live so long and stay so mentally sharp, she said it had something to do with her quitting smoking at the age of 103. And she also told a reporter that it's just that nothing seems to kill me. So here we go, another what are called super centenarians who have a multi-decade experience of smoking cigarettes, and not only do they not seem to evince any kind of negative aspects from smoking, they actually seem to thrive and live to extraordinary old age. So when anybody tells you that smoking is lethal, I think it's pretty clear it isn't. So let's see if we can get back to me here. Well, sorry again for the technical difficulties. Oh, there we go. Boy, this is really funny. So what else is new in the world of tobacco? Well, somewhere on Facebook, I came upon an article regarding this state rep in New Hampshire who has said that, well, one of his pet peeves is that, the New Hampshire motto is live free or die. And Representative Hull says that in a state where it's live free or die, he does not see why bar or restaurant owners cannot permit people to smoke in their own property, the property that they pay tax on, the property that, that they're, even if their customers want to smoke and their employees want to smoke, the state demands that they not. So this is really an issue to some degree about property rights, to some degree about freedom and individual liberty, and also, of course, to some degree about the science of secondhand smoke and whether secondhand smoke is toxic. And we have Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights have gotten a lot of people to email Representative Hull, and according to what I've read in some article from a New Hampshire source, at least the health committee or the committee that is dealing with this in the state legislature of New Hampshire is considering giving it the go-ahead so that it could go through the entire legislature. So anybody who is concerned about the nanny state, is concerned about individual freedom, who is skeptical of the science of secondhand smoke and this kind of authoritarianism that is becoming particularly pervasive in public health, would do very well to contact our Facebook page or contact me, and we can give you the contact information for Representative Hull. But this is something that looks good, and of course, any political action, no matter how small, has consequences. May not have all the consequences you want. Sending off a single email to a legislator may not make your side prevail, but it makes a difference. And I think that oftentimes we can become skeptical politically and say, oh, this doesn't make a difference or that doesn't make a difference. And that skepticism actually is kind of masking a laziness. We just don't want to be bothered. It's easier not to send that email. There are things we would prefer to do. And I think that is just laziness more than it is cynicism, although there is a cynicism is a kind of poison that can render one very, very impotent. Now, one really negative piece of news that came out, I heard on the radio yesterday, is that the big fire that was in Cambridge, I think it was about 2 months ago, where at least half a dozen buildings burned. Fortunately, no one was injured or killed, but the city officials are now saying the cause of the fire was careless disposal of smoking materials. Now, it is well known in fire circles that when the cause of a fire is difficult or impossible to determine, it is very tempting for fire officials to blame it on that cause. And of course, there is no one really who's going to push back other than Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights. Now, they went through a very, very long period of investigating this fire, and it was a fire that engulfed, I don't know, as I say, at least half a dozen houses. It might have been even 12 or 16. I'm kind of embarrassed to say I don't remember the exact number. But how they could determine with any kind of certainty that it was the careless disposal of the smoking materials, I don't know. I mean, certainly when you have a massive fire like this, we're not going to find a cigarette butt next to a pile of papers or something and say, oh, that's obvious it was a cigarette butt. I mean, we had, I guess, as I say, at least a dozen houses burned down. You know, how they determine this. So hopefully I will be able to get a copy of the report from the State Fire Marshal's office. Of course, this is a public record, and the last time I requested such a report, the State Fire Marshal's office was very forthcoming, and I will take a look and see what the evidence is. My guess is they did interview a certain number of workers because there was work being done in this area, construction work or rehabilitation work, and you know, I certainly doubt they found some workers that, oh yes, I threw a cigarette butt into a can of oil-soaked rags. So how it really boggles my mind how they could come up with this evidence. Of course, they don't really need much evidence. Certainly, there's not going to be any physical evidence that will point to this. And of course, Cambridge is considering banning smoking on construction sites, which we have fought, opposed. And so it was a little bit disheartening to me to hear this on the news yesterday. I looked in the Globe today, and there was only a small article on this. But again, the last time I went to the State Fire Marshal's office, on email, I think I did on email, I can't even remember, but they were very forthcoming, and I got a report, and that was a report that was that had to do with the Martin Luther King School on Putnam Avenue, which experienced a fire during some reconstruction, and the city was saying it was caused by so-called careless disposal of smoking materials. But when I looked at the actual report from the State Fire Marshal's office, they said that that could have been the cause, it might have been the cause, they couldn't find another cause, but that they did not determine that with any degree of certainty. So, you know, as it's like that game with telephone, the State Fire Marshal's office will say something, and then that will go to our city fathers, our city fire department, and they will make it sound a little bit more certain than it really is. And of course, I am not accusing our council or our fire department of any kind of malfeasance. I'm simply saying that sometimes when a story gets passed on, especially when we're looking for an answer, to a question, sometimes we always want to look for that certainty. I had a friend who developed bladder cancer. And, he said to his doctor, well, why did I get bladder cancer? Oh, well, because you went to the racetrack with your father and he smoked a lot. So the secondhand smoke caused your bladder cancer. Of course, my friend's father, I believe, lived to be the age of 88 and never had bladder cancer. And he was smoking probably for 70 years and never had bladder cancer. So, but my friend, he was looking for that reason. And, without good evidence, I think it's very irresponsible of medical officials or any official to blame it, particularly on tobacco, when there isn't good evidence. Thanks for watching the smoking section. We'll be on next week, Wednesday.